Victoria Hammond lives alone in a sixth-floor apartment in Midtown Nashville. I can hear someone playing the piano in the flat below, and morning light streams in through the large glass windows. Each weekend. I've been at this stage for over 6 years. No assistance from anybody, only more shifts. For evenings and dinners, use instant noodles. I collapsed on my desk. Everything I had worked so hard to create was flipped over in a single statement, like a crimson wine spill on a white tablecloth. Every month on the first Sunday, the Hammond family meals took place at the cream-colored two-story house in Franklin where my parents had resided for 35 years. I purposely came 5 minutes late. It was only a little act of defiance. I gave myself permission to protest silently that I was no longer the submissive daughter who nodded at everything. As if it were a formality, my father Edward opened the door and gave me a slack hug. My younger sister Sophie was already buried in the couch reading through her phone, as if no one else was around, while my mother Linda was busy in the kitchen preparing her famous roast. She is a pleasant, attractive 27-year-old who constantly brings a new dilemma to family gatherings. She had known her fiancé for less than a year and she was devastated by him. "Sit down, Victoria." She added, "I just reheated the roast, pfft," without raising her gaze. After giving a nod, I entered the dining room. The tablecloth was fresh and the glasses were precisely aligned. Everything appeared to be orchestrated like a play. Additionally, I suspected that the screenplay for tonight had already been written. After approximately 20 minutes of dining, my father put down his cutlery and cleared his throat. I seldom wanted to hear the unspoken family signal that anything was going to be announced. Sophie requires a short-term residence. He started off reading the stock report in the same tone. We discussed it. For a time, she will be residing at your apartment. I almost used my fork to stab my own hand. Please pardon me. I put down my drink carefully. My flat. It does really have 2 bedrooms. As she poured my dad more wine, my mother said, "You also travel for work all the time. It will be a waste of your office. Nobody bothered to ask me." I questioned, attempting to maintain my tone despite the burning sensation in my throat. Sophie smiled smirkingly as she glanced up. "I only need a few months to sort things out in my life. Your place is ideal, but Mom and Dad's is claustrophobic." She answered, "It makes perfect sense." It makes sense. As if she were promoting a campaign plan rather than prying into someone's private affairs. I laughed thinly and without humor. I wish my reflection had been visible. I believe I would have appeared messed up. I don't remember consenting to any of this, and my office isn't for rent. My dad let out a sigh. My mom pulled up her calendar. "Sophie will move in on Saturday of next week. Uncle Frank's vehicle was borrowed by your father. In her room, we'll arrange the queen bed that we got from the garage." It was like to watching a film. I didn't go to the audition. With the exception of the main role, everything had previously been cast, practiced, and performed. They hadn't even asked the real owner of the residence. I put down my cutlery. "Victoria?" My mother whispered quietly, "I don't agree to this." "It's family. Families support one another." "Well then why don't you let Sophie sleep in your living room, rent her own apartment like I did 10 years ago? When you advised me to be independent and grow up, or stay in Aunt Carol's basement apartment." The ensuing hush was oppressive. Sophie leaned back in her chair and sneered. "Whoa, it's not necessary to be that theatrical." I looked at my parents, then at her. "I used my own funds to purchase this place. The place isn't a guest house. It isn't a shared asset." "You're exaggerating," my dad whispered. "You're exaggerating the situation. It won't last long." I pushed my chair back and stood up. When temporary is carried out without consent, it is still illegal. Nobody responded. They didn't have to. The message was quite obvious. I was the only one with a sense of realism in that place. I was still viewed by them as an extension of the family. Quiet, controllable, always accessible. However, I wasn't her tonight. With a weight on my chest and the wind tearing through a broken glass, I drove away in quiet. Stone heavy and cold. I didn't need permission to go, but I hadn't been ejected. I had known that silent form of exile for a long time. As a child, I was constantly aware of my place in the Hammond home. The responsible daughter in the center. The girl who was never troublesome. Didn't need to be said. I was supposed to be silent and helpful. Keep your distance. Since I was too old to receive assistance, I mended my own clothing in middle school, filled out scholars and shipped paperwork by myself, and phoned employment hotlines after my stipend was reduced. The picture that hung in the middle of the living room was of my sister Vanessa, who is now 34. She had a graduation celebration in a resort close to Charleston despite studying interior design, switching majors 3 times, and taking a year off to establish her artistic voice. I recall putting up picture collages and monitoring the mics while I was backstage at the event. All Vanessa could do was grin. Everything else. Now let Victoria handle it. She resides in a 2-bedroom condo that my parents purchased in their name in Austin. Her work is inconsistent. Every time she falters, the family jumps in like she's a fallen Olympian, even when boyfriends come and go. Because baby daughter is under a lot of stress. Mom just sighed and prepared her a special supper when she took money out of her retirement account to establish a creative studio. My brother comes next. Troy, 24, has changed schools 3 times and is still not a college graduate. Every setback serves as a teaching opportunity. Every error is a necessary part of maturing. Even when he failed a class last year due to forgetting the deadline, his father sent him money to assist him get his act together. I have no grudges, no more. However, I am always requested to relinquish control of my own environment, such as my residence. It's difficult to avoid feeling like I'm simply another piece of furniture that the Hammonds share. I recall spending 2 nights in the hospital after contracting pneumonia. When I contacted my mother to inform her, she gave me a cold reaction. All okay, have some soup. I'm occupied with Vanessa. She just ended her relationship with that man. At a red light, the vehicle came to a stop. I released my breath like though I had been holding it in my throat the entire night. High-rise skyscrapers glistened in the skyline ahead. Even if my heart felt like a map that was so folded and wrinkled that it was unrecognizable, the city continued to exist. I glanced to the building where my unit was waiting silently. No one had inquired about my feelings over Sophie's move-in. Just an announcement, no authorization. To be honest, I wasn't surprised by them. Even if it broke me on the inside, I was the one who always made room and nodded. After parking in the garage, I rode the elevator to the top floor and used my fingerprint to unlock the door, the one that I modified a month prior. After learning that my mother had done some useful cleaning while I was away, it was quiet inside. Greetings. Quiet. I switched the lights on, strolled past the living room, stroking the edge of the plush gray sofa with my fingers, and stopped at the doorway of the kitchen where I had hung a framed picture. I hiked in Utah by myself. My relatives never inquired about that picture. Nobody ever inquired as to why I choose to live alone. What I had to go through to maintain my current position as a manager at a company that specializes in renewable energy systems, or why I never invited anybody home to meet them. I opened the notes program on my laptop and typed one line. Just because I'm not creating trouble doesn't mean I have to burden others. The list of vacation days I had refused to take in order to work extra was still there on the left side of the screen. While Troy hosted poolside birthday parties with his self-discovery gang and Vanessa went on mom-sponsored retreats in Arizona, I couldn't even recall how many Christmases, Thanksgivings, and birthdays I had missed in order to make deadlines. In my household, favoritism wasn't overt. By the time you noticed, the damage was already deeply discolored, moldy, and almost hard to clean out. It came in droplets like water seeping through walls. After shutting off the lights in the kitchen, I entered my office. Mom referred to it as the extra room. I retained my technical books, a vision board for the environmental project I was working on with an NGO, and small mementos that reminded me that I wasn't someone's shadow in this place. I sat down in my swivel chair and glanced around the room, picturing Sophie looking through her phone while she slept on a bed I had made. I decided to invade. Every place I named home made me feel sick. I stopped making sacrifices because I didn't want to, not because I detested her. If the building management still didn't regard me as a fully autonomous person, I opened my email, entered the subject line, Policy on Temporary Residence, and pushed send. Then I had to begin demonstrating it. Beginning with the slightest things, I once believed that perseverance was a virtue, and that those I loved would ultimately understand if I was patient and gentle enough. However, the only thing I've learned in the last 25 years has come from the Hammond family. Silence was agreement, not strength. My mother abruptly announced that I would be watching her cousin Denise's twin infants when I was 14 years old during a summer that was so hot that it seemed like fire across Tennessee. Little hurricanes of chaos. While my friends went swimming, danced, painted, or attended skill camp, I got up at 6 every morning to clean the home, prepare breakfast for them, break up fights when one of them clawed at the other's face, and watch over them while they slept. No one asked me. My mother responded, "You don't do much to help this family," in response to my complaints. "This is your opportunity. Denise is having trouble. You don't give a damn about those people. You don't give a damn about people." Like a stab to the ribs, it haunted me whenever I attempted to refuse. I was awarded a full scholarship to attend the University of Minnesota for my undergraduate education. I was ecstatic. When I received the letter, I cried in the restroom of the library. I could hardly imagine Aunt Sandra, but a week later, Mom sent me a printed email asking whether her daughter could stay with me while she interned in Nashville. There was a broken chair that I propped up with books, an ancient bunk bed, and a desk in my off-campus apartment. I was nevertheless instructed to share for the benefit of my family. While Sandra's daughter occupied my bed, used my belongings, griped about my spaghetti, and brought her new boyfriend over for giddy midnight visits, I slept on the floor in a sleeping bag that year. Once I pushed back, that same night my mother called. Ice-cold voice. "You're surviving on a scholarship and other people's kindness, Victoria. Avoid giving the impression that you are self-centered and petty. There is just one brief summer. Avoid being theatrical." I felt like a visitor in my own apartment for 92 days over the course of 1 summer and 3 months. However, they referred to it as a sharing opportunity. They called it family compassion. I developed my ability to be silent. I discovered that I should wait to eat until others have finished. Family meetings where I was never consulted taught me to nod. Learned to shrink so Vanessa could shine and Troy could fall apart and still be caught. And then it became habit, like walking into a crowded room where every spotlight shines on someone else, and convincing yourself to stand in the shadows because you've forgotten you deserve to step into the light too. This apartment is the first place I haven't had to share with anyone. Every corner was my decision. Every decoration bought with real savings. No handouts, no applause, no resistance. So when Mom said that office is just going to waste, my entire body clenched. Not because they didn't understand, but because they didn't care. To them, my space was still up for grabs. As long as the excuse sounded reasonable, I remembered when Troy shattered someone's car window playing ball in a parking lot. My parents apologized for him when Vanessa lost her apartment deposit in Austin because she spent it on vintage furniture. Everyone called it an unfortunate misstep, but when I refused to host a cousin for 2 weeks last year because I was leading a confidential project, Mom said I was unnecessarily cold. Every time I set a boundary, I was labeled heartless. Every time I said no, I was told I lacked compassion. Every time I chose myself, I was accused of betraying family values. When I vented to Katie, my best friend since high school, now a lawyer in Atlanta, she sighed. So long it sounded like steam escaping a pipe. "Vic, your family doesn't see your interpersonal space as lines. They see them as unlocked doors." I used to believe that family is forever, but now I know only what is respected lasts. A house without walls or locks becomes a public rest stop, and a person without control over their own life will always live by someone else's script. I turned off the lights, pulled out my phone, opened notes, and typed. From now on, no one enters my space without knocking. When I walked into Dr. Hadley's office, it was lightly raining in Nashville. Not enough to soak a jacket, but enough to make you want to stay indoors. Her office was on the 3rd floor of an old building near Centennial Park with dark wood floors and abstract paintings on the walls. Not bland like a typical doctor's office, but not cozy enough to lower your guard either. "Victoria," her voice called out just as I shut the door. Firm. No hesitation. I nodded, sitting on the leather chair. It took me a few seconds to find a way to begin. Not because I didn't have anything to say, because I wasn't used to someone actually wanting to hear it. I had booked the appointment after Katie sent me the contact. Her message simply read, "Think of this as investing in yourself." I gave a quick overview of my family. Not very long. Only the necessities. Dr. Hadley put down her pen, leaned back, and met my eyes as I reached the section about my parents choosing to let my sister move into my apartment without consulting me. And what did they say when you resisted? I chuckled dryly that I was being self-centered and making a big deal out of nothing. Unsurprised, she nodded. "Do you frequently describe your way of life with the word endure?" I remained silent. There was no need for an answer to that question. Every decision I made to take a step back contained the answer. I bit my tongue at every dinner. I left each room open for someone else to enter. Following that initial session, I drove more slowly on the way home, but I didn't feel any lighter or more enlightened. After weeks for the first time, I turned into my favorite coffee shop and let the rain drip into my hair. No umbrella. Don't dodge. My mother called the following day. The slight act of turning down the call made my chest tighten as if I were betraying someone. I made myself a cup of peppermint tea, put the phone face down on the kitchen counter, and listened to a jazz playlist. My dad sent me an email on Thursday night. "Can you prepare for Thanksgiving the way you did last year? Everyone is anticipating your mashed potatoes." My hand remained motionless on the mouse as I gazed at the line. While everyone else drank wine and engaged in political debates in the living room, I spent the entire Wednesday night of last year working 12-hour days the week before, and then spending the entire evening peeling potatoes, basting turkey, and setting the table. I slowly typed a response. It's obvious that this year I won't be hosting Thanksgiving. I need to take a break and take care of myself. I hope the gathering is wonderful for everyone. No apology, no explanation. Only a choice. My heart raced the instant I hit send. Feeling the thump against my palm, I put a hand on my chest. The nervous buzz, however, did not spiral as it had previously. It was a bodily response that seemed necessary, like the burn you get after going up a long flight of stairs. Your mind is clearer, but your body hurts. Vanessa texted the following day, but my mom didn't call right away. Mom is very upset. I no longer understand what's going on with you. You can't really help for a single day. I didn't respond. When I told Katie what had happened, she came over on Saturday night. She nodded slowly while sitting on the rug with a mug of cocoa. She said, "You're not changing. You're simply getting back to your true size. After 20 years of reducing yourself to meet the expectations of others." The soft yellow light on the walls of my apartment caught my attention. The bookshelf is set up in a gradient of colors that I created myself. The hand-woven rug I brought back from my trip to Oregon. The room was still the same, but tonight it seemed larger, as if it were creating space for a quiet I had never before dared to let in. I was on time for Dr. Hadley's office the following week. No need for reminders, without hesitation. "What did you find different about this week?" she inquired. After giving it some thought, I responded. "No," I replied, and I made it through. When she heard a sprout had finally reached sunlight, she smiled softly. I let the breeze rush in by rolling down the window on the way home. The blinking city lights resembled exclamation points for change. At least I was driving now, even though I had no idea how far I would go. No more taking the lead in other people's lives. I spent almost an hour reading the lease agreement again while seated in front of my laptop. Section 5.3 contained the fine text clause I was searching for. Management must provide written approval for any long-term visitor who stays longer than 14 days in a row or 21 days in a non-consecutive period within 6 months. There was a warning beneath it. Leases that are violated may be terminated immediately. Hold the language. However, it served as armor for me to defend myself against intrusions posing as familial responsibilities, not to start a fight. After printing the lease and underlining the important parts, I sent an email to May Whitaker, the building manager, informing her that I was thinking about having a temporary visitor for a 2-week work trip. I wanted to follow the correct procedure and made it clear that this was only a legal short-term arrangement and not a full sublease. The following morning, she responded. May gave her approval to attach a guest declaration form and ask for a short-term addendum and a copy of identification. Everything is clear. Official. No space for family sentiments to muddy the waters. My authority over my personal space. There is just one more issue. Locating the ideal occupant. Ben from the engineering team came to mind. Nice guy, but a mess. Lisa had a canine. No fit. Then I thought about Mason, the project manager I had collaborated with in Charlotte. He had just disclosed that he needed a place to stay for a few weeks while his apartment was being repaired in terms of the plumbing. Everybody at work was aware that he had been searching for a short-term fix. I texted Mason to let him know that I had a 2-week apartment available if he still needed a temporary residence. Someone is required to house it. It is possible to set up a legal temporary agreement. He called less than 20 minutes later, sounding steady and a little relieved. Thank you so much for this. Shall we have a face-to-face meeting? Indeed. At 6 o'clock tonight, I'll be prepared with the documentation. The meeting proceeded without incident. Mason signed the draft agreement, showed up on time, was well-groomed, and had a copy of his ID. I was ready. I described the circumstances. The section on family boundaries was summed up as a private matter that calls for discretion and calm. He gave a nod, recognizing. No inquiries were made. All you have to do is leave the place in its current state when I depart. Without a key, no one can enter. There's no need to elaborate. If someone rings, simply state that you have a valid agreement and are the authorized guest. No issue. Mason grinned, signing the contract with firmness. I sent Mason's ID a clear checkmark in Scout's schedule and a scanned copy of the file to May via email. Complete compliance. There are no gaps left for any unforeseen family plans. After that, I put a tiny camera in the living room that was pointed at the front door. In order to keep an eye on Mason, the device featured motion alerts and live feed access via an app. To guard against people like Hammond who still thought they had default access to my life, I trusted him. Her mother texted her 3 days later. The moving truck has been rented by your dad for Saturday. Sophia is choosing curtains. Prepare the space. No question mark? No. Is that acceptable? I didn't respond. Mason only received one message from me. Family members might arrive unexpectedly. Adhere to our agreement. He added if necessary after responding with a got it emoji. I have the patience of an engineer and strong coffee. I packed up any valuables on Friday night, including a camera, some small jewelry, and personal documents. I kept them in a double-locked locker at my workplace for the time being. After that, I rented a modest room close to Rosemary Beach where nobody knew who I was and the waves were strong enough to shake off the static in my head. When I turned on my phone on Saturday morning, 3 motion alerts had been detected by the camera. I clicked on the feed. My dad was seen knocking on the door next to him in the first clip. Mom had a big plastic bin in her hand. Sophie was standing behind them with her arms folded and her large sunglasses on. The door opening was captured in the second clip. Mason was inside dressed in jeans and a white t-shirt, his hair slightly disheveled. He stayed inside. My dad's eyes widened when he said something. My mother started indicating the door. Sophie took a step back and took out her phone to make a call. Mason was seen pointing to the line with his name printed on the signed agreement in the final clip. A security guard from the building showed up. My family and I spoke for a little while before departing. Although their faces weren't completely captured on camera, their rigid posture and the way their mother's hand gripped the purse strap spoke volumes. I inhaled deeply. I closed the app after saving the video to my personal archive. My phone glowed with unread notifications the following morning. Mom missed 6 calls, Dad missed 5, and Sophie sent a barrage of messages that could have been a short novel with the only difference being the tone, which ranged from gentle to sharp. The first line from Mom: "You can't take this seriously, Victoria." A picture of Sophie standing in front of the moving truck with her face flushed and the caption, "This is how you treat your sister," followed by the statement, "I feel completely betrayed." It was a shorter but more impactful message from Dad. "The whole family is being humiliated by you. Give me a call now." With a slow exhale, I placed the phone on the granite counter of the hotel and walked out onto the balcony. Although the sea air was chilly, it was much more tolerable than the demands from my device that were laced with guilt. I looked at the apartment's security feed an hour later. Mason was reading a book in the living room, on the coffee table with their feet up. My parents had come back with the building manager and were standing outside in the hallway. Mom's expression didn't require sound, but there was no audio. Her eyes were squinting, her lips were pressed firmly together, and she kept pointing to the door. Presenting the sublease agreement, Mason opened it halfway. The manager nodded after skimming a few lines. With tight-lipped resolve, Linda turned around, took out her phone, and muttered something under her breath. She was walking down the hallway at the end of the video, her fingers whitened as she gripped the strap of her purse. My phone rang. "Sophie," I allowed it to ring. 15 seconds. 20. I unlocked it and read her subsequent message when the screen eventually went dark. "Tonight I have nowhere to sleep. Mom is in tears. Dad is enraged. All I need is a little assistance." Is it really that difficult to comprehend? Not really a question. Just a demand veiled in animosity. An hour later, my mother sent a message that started with 2 screens. "Do you recall having that fever when you were 3 years old? And in order to expel your own blood relatives, I spent the entire night sponging you down and ended up leaving you feeling like a stranger in your house." The next message from Dad: "All of this has worn your mother out. If you still have any compassion, you will consider your options carefully before ruining our small family." I didn't respond. I texted Katie instead. "The situation is getting worse." A few minutes later, she called. She spoke calmly and without surprise. "I'll guess. Guilt, salvation, and emotional blackmail all demanded." As if they were going word for word from a manipulator's handbook. I laughed, but my throat was constricted. "Do you feel bad about it?" She was direct in her question. "I do in part." I stopped. "It feels like I threw out my own family, even though I know I'm correct." "You didn't throw anyone out, Victoria. In the first place, they were never invited in. That's a significant difference." At that, I became silent. My gaze strayed to the sea where waves roared without regard for onlookers. Sophie shared a picture on Instagram that afternoon. She had perfect makeup and was sitting in a car. However, it said, "Thrown out while mourning a breakup" in the caption. "To the person who loves me the most, thank you." An hour later, 38 likes. 2 of her pals wrote empathetic remarks. In a reply, one even tagged me. I didn't answer. I just sent Katie a screenshot that I took. "Truth is not what they desire. They're looking for a crowd." She answered. Dad called 3 times that evening. Mom left a voicemail that lasted 3 minutes. I didn't open it. Sophie kept posting mysterious captions about people who conceal cruelty behind kindness on Instagram. I turned off all of their accounts' notifications. I'm still watching, simply not paying attention. They were free to talk as they pleased. I no longer had to listen to it. I lay in the hotel room as night fell, the ceiling softly glowing from the bedside lamp. Quiet. There's no buzzing on my phone. No compromises disguised as half-truths. Without worrying about anyone disturbing the silence, I closed my eyes. I had finally stopped allowing my family to enter, not because they had stopped pushing. In East Nashville, I chose a tiny cafe, neutral territory. It was far enough away from home to be quiet enough that no one could claim it as familiar ground. I was 15 minutes early. I set my phone on the table face down and ordered a cappuccino. A silent signal to myself. Remain composed. Avoid reverting to outdated regulations. At the same time, my parents showed up with solemn expressions on their faces. I once gave her a blue wool coat for her birthday, which she called Mom. Now it appeared to be someone else's. Dad was wearing his sharp suit as usual. Dark tie, striding with the haste of someone entering a crucial meeting. A few minutes later, Sophie arrived, slowing down, holding a drink and a match. When she noticed me, she didn't wear any makeup. Her eyes appeared uncertain and her hair was neatly tied back. She shared on Instagram that she was nothing like the polished version of herself. I remained standing. They sat and simply nodded. Nobody was the first to speak. No hugs, not even a hello. Before I started, I waited for one more breath. I didn't ask for arguments from everyone. I ended up saying things that ought to have been said long ago. My father arched an eyebrow, crossed arms. My mother repositioned her scarf. Sophie's gaze was fixed on the table. It's because without consulting me, you decided Sophie would move into my apartment. Went too far. It was more than just rude. It totally disregarded my freedom of choice. Mom scowled. Do you live alone? There is a spare room in the apartment. Sophie had to find somewhere to stay. That makes sense, doesn't it? To whom is it reasonable? I spoke in a level tone. No one asked me. As usual, I was told. My father made a low, tight cut in his voice. This is being exaggerated by you. This is not a property dispute, it is a family issue. In my hands, I rotated the coffee cup. Dad. Being a family member does not grant you access to someone's life. I have let it happen for too long. When asked to make a sacrifice, I have said yes. However, nobody ever paused to inquire about my desire to do so. Sophie moved a little, her eyes sad. I assumed you concurred. Mom said you didn't have time to reply because you were busy. I gave her a look. Did you ever give me a call to ask me directly, Sophie, or did you just listen and assume since it was simpler that way? There was silence for a few seconds. My mother clenched. Rather than finding answers, her hands were pointing fingers. The best thing, in my opinion, would be Mom. Since middle school, I have been the answer. I've done everything from giving up my bed to watching Cousins to managing my own college finances. The youngest of you two paid for him to study film in Los Angeles, but he eventually left. I've never been thought of as having boundaries. My father's shoulders fell. He furrowed the crease between his brows. It's possible that we became accustomed to you handling it, but that doesn't mean that was our intention. I gave a small nod. The problem is that, whether on purpose or not, the hurt still exists and I cannot continue to bear the weight because others believe I am capable of doing so. Sophie raised her head, looking more slowly than she had when she had first entered. I sincerely apologize. I should have checked with you before relying on what they said. As usual, I assumed you would say yes. However, I see that I've grown too accustomed to being given priority without accountability. She rarely backs down, so I was a little taken aback when she made the admission. With a softening voice, my mother let out a breath. I didn't anticipate it progressing this far. All I wanted was for the two of you to be close. I should have asked, but I was afraid you wouldn't say yes. You decided to force it then. Her eyes fell to the ground, but she did not respond. She made the motion of spinning her wedding ring with her fingers, only when she was upset. By speaking in a softer tone than usual, my dad diffused the situation. Perhaps we should reconsider how this family interacts with one another. From Sophie's arrival to the way we've forced things upon you without your consent. I sat in silence. Something relaxed within me. Not pardon, but breathing room. I'm not rebelling, I'm defending my boundaries. The kind of boundaries I ought to have learned, not disregarded, while supporting this family in silence. The silence was different this time, but my parents didn't answer. Not chilly, simply listening. Sophie pursed her lips, then reached into her jacket and took out a printed sheet. An inventory of rental properties. She slid it in our parents' direction. Tomorrow afternoon, I will visit this location. If it's all right with you, both assist with the deposit. My father gave a nod. My mother nodded slightly. I glanced at my sister after looking at the paper. Do not be afraid to ask for help if you need it. However, don't count on anyone to carry you. Starting over is an option, but you will need to do it alone. Sophie smiled a little. I'm making an effort. Actually, after over an hour we got up. No tears, no hugs. However, there was no pressure behind me when I left the cafe. It was space. Unambiguous. Defined area. We shouldn't be too far apart to lose each other forever, but not so close that I couldn't breathe. Sophie texted a picture of a tiny apartment in the Berry Hill area 3 weeks after the cafe meeting. Sliding windows and white walls with a backyard view. She held a key in the air while standing in the center of the living room in the photo. She had a genuine smile on her face without any makeup. I personally signed the lease. Although it's in my name this time, Mom still contributed somewhat to the deposit. I appreciate you encouraging me to mature at the appropriate time. I took a long look at the message before responding. I'm proud of you. No emojis or overly dramatic language, just one line. Enough to indicate that a real change had occurred. We have scheduled a meeting for that Saturday. No one else was invited. Sophie chose a burger joint close to her new workspace. No photo opportunity, no gaudy decor. Corners. She had ordered my favorite sandwich and was seated 10 minutes early. I began seeing Dr. Hartman, whom I had previously referred to as useless and pointless for therapy. I arched an eyebrow. In fact, you went because you initially did. I reasoned that perhaps I'm not immune either if someone like you needs assistance. Her eyes spoke louder than her tone, not irony. Sincerity. We discussed schoolwork. She intends to use social media less. The past was not dug up as if it needed to be discussed. It was merely an incident that had occurred and was being dealt with. Between two women with the last name Hammond, there are no parallels or lingering shadows. Change for our parents came gradually, but eventually. Before every holiday, my mother started making calls. She said, I'm not assuming I'll be there or play a role at Christmas anymore. I can get you something if you don't want dessert. However, I would be interested in hearing any suggestions you may have. I consented to help, but I did so voluntarily rather than as a requirement. Although my father didn't say much, he no longer makes long directive calls. Rather, they are neutral inquiries. How are things at work these days? Would you like me to look over the solar contract? No pushing, no pressure. He called to ask if I was free for coffee one afternoon while he was in Nashville on business. We took a seat at a tiny cafe close to his hotel. After looking around the room, he asked, "When did you leave home?" I assumed it was merely a period of rebellion. I see now. Perhaps you took a step that many of us in the family ought to have taken sooner. I took a while to respond. Did you ever feel suffocated by the role you were handed? I asked, taking a sip of coffee. He avoided looking at me. He simply put his hand on the table and gave a small nod. I didn't require any more clarification. For my part, I went back to my regular routine, but with a more stable foundation. Not patience in the traditional sense, but a lucid awareness of boundaries. Avoidance is no longer an option when the phone rings and I don't answer. I'm busy putting myself first, which is why. Is there anything you can do to help? My mom asks every time I feel a little lighter, rather than saying, take care of this for me. My personal boundaries didn't cause the family to fall apart. They simply rewrote an interaction pattern that used to make me feel as though I was out of breath. Those spaces between people didn't create walls. To ensure that everyone knows where to stop before entering another person's concept of home, they drew lines. I felt almost unaccustomed to the peace inside of me one afternoon as I stood at my apartment door with my hand on the lock. Behind it, no one was waiting. There isn't a suitcase at the door. No voicemail requesting that I make another sacrifice. Setting limits isn't selfish, as the story of Victoria makes abundantly evident. Mutual respect and self-worth must be safeguarded. She did not abandon her family. Rather than imposing herself, she made them learn how to talk. Victoria established a new environment where relationships are based on maturity, clarity, and choice after she ceased being the one who perseveres. A well-timed no can sometimes be the first step toward true love. How do you feel about Victoria's self-defense and privacy protection? Please leave a comment below and remember to subscribe to the channel for more compelling, real-life accounts of contemporary family dynamics. Story 2. Ruby Marshall is my name. I am currently standing in the Grand Resort by Lake Arrowhead in California, and I am 37 years old. The location where, in an unwritten custom, my husband's family gets together each summer. I've never really been invited into this tradition. She forgot the sauce again, I promise. As soon as I carried a tray of bread into the banquet hall, my mother-in-law Elaine muttered. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to make the other 3 people at the table turn and stare at me as if I were a careless waiter. As a structural architect, I provide consulting services for major urban redevelopment projects ranging from Denver to Los Angeles. However, I am only Connor's wife to the Hartwell family, particularly Elaine, a voiceless woman who works with computers or drawings. I never really had anyone ask me what I did. I was just my husband's extension in their opinion. The courteous shadow at the end of the table, quietly clearing away after meals and grinning when allowed. I promised myself that I wouldn't let it affect me each time I came here. Can she even eat salty food was one of the comments that I chose to ignore. Or Ruby. Could you please get more napkins? That eroded a sense of pride that had already been eroded by years of marginalization. Their favorite resort, the Ridgewood Estate, exuded old-school luxury in every way, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get used to feeling inferior to the doorman. A stone fireplace larger than the living room I grew up in, polished mahogany and crystal chandeliers. But I felt smaller than ever as I stood in the midst of all that grandeur. My husband Connor teaches American history at a private university. Good-natured, calm, and able to speak non-stop for 3 hours about the Cold War. But when I needed him on my side, he was there. He would merely squeeze my hand beneath the table and whisper. When his mother said I sounded a little sour, or when his sister winced at my Macy's dress rather than Chanel. It wasn't her intention. You are aware of that. Yes, but comprehending does not imply eternal acceptance. Like the previous 8 years, I arrived this year, wearing a simple dress and the same courteous smile that I had conditioned into my reflex. And I was the one asked to get more plates just like the previous times. Front desk employees were mistaken, regarded less like the oldest daughter-in-law and more like a lost visitor. Connor's cousin once turned to me at the first dinner of the trip and asked if I could help bring out the wine. Since you appear to know the kitchen quite well. I chose a different response, which is why I didn't react, not because I was weak. When you're working on something larger than they could ever imagine, silence can be the most effective form of rejection. The moment Elaine introduced me to her friend is still fresh in my mind. This is Connor's wife, Ruby. I believe she does something digital. Then, as though to protect me from having to explain something too difficult, she smiled. They never spoke to me. They always spoke around me, as though I were ornamental, unimportant, and inoffensive. I once believed that they would view me differently if I were patient and sincere enough. I wrapped all of the Christmas presents myself the first year I was a part of the family, carefully labeling each one for each of Connor's cousins. I organized a surprise birthday celebration for his father the following year. Due to his allergy, Richard hired a private chef and created a menu devoid of soy. However, Connor's cousin's wife, who brought one homemade butter cookie, was thanked. Brianna, thank you for everything. Elaine, who neglected to write my name on the thank you card, said, "You're very considerate." Another time I rented the RV and organized the entire camping trip in Xi'an, but the tents organized the shopping list. However, Connor gave me an introduction when we got there. Everyone is familiar with Ruby. It was a compliment, but it made me feel more like a multitasking maid than a partner. She never minded the heavy lifting. In the laundry room in the car parked outside Whole Foods in the shower with the water running, so no one could hear, I used to cry quietly. The only time Connor ever inquired about my well-being was when I left my phone in the living room, which was the only time I thought he would notice. He either didn't want to or didn't see everything else. Everyone adores you. Simply put, you're too sensitive. Every time I tried to convey how excluded I felt, he would say this. I eventually stopped saying anything at all. I plunged headfirst into my work. Laser-focused, almost obsessive. I started taking on side projects, modular home designs for flood zones, technical consulting for sustainable construction companies. Some months, I worked over 90 hours a week without a single complaint. All I had was an expanding savings account and an inbox full of offers for new partnerships from strangers. I didn't splurge, wore clothing from the outlet, did my own hair, drove an old SUV with over 120,000 miles on it. To them, it only reinforced their assumption. Ruby was simple, didn't know how to enjoy life. Someone even asked if I was struggling financially. I smiled and said nothing. During that time, I started paying attention to small-scale real estate. I didn't follow trends. I studied from scratch, taught myself about valuation cash flow tax codes. I formed an LLC called Birch Light Holdings to hold all the assets. No one knew I was behind it. 3 years later, I owned 2 small apartment buildings in Idaho, a short-term rental in Bend, Oregon, and a guest house in Utah. Quiet, consistent income, but it still wasn't enough. I needed something bigger, closer. Something that would make the Hartwells take notice. That opportunity came late last spring when I stumbled upon a private listing in an industry group, the Ridgewood Estate. The same resort the Hartwells called their second home was quietly seeking a buyer for majority control. The original owner was aging and stepping away from operations. No public listing, just private offers to vetted investors. I didn't think twice. I called Rachel, a former colleague now working at a hotel investment firm. We met in Denver, signed an NDA, and began negotiations. "Are you certain?" Rachel asked, eyeing the multi-million-dollar valuation. "This isn't just a cozy mountain condo." I looked her in the eye and nodded. "I've waited too long for this." 7 months later, the deal was closed. I became the largest shareholder of Ridgewood, all through Birchlight Holdings. Connor didn't know. Neither did his family. They just thought the resort had made a few new changes this year because the new owner doesn't understand tradition. I didn't feel the need to correct them. I just quietly fixed every detail they used to complain about, from the noisy air conditioning to the dinner service, and waited for the right moment. And this year, as they returned again, dressed to impress, raising wine glasses and making their usual smug comments, I knew I was ready to stop waiting for their approval. I still remember that night one summer evening a year ago when I sat alone on a bench by the lake, the breeze carrying the scent of pine and smoke from the outdoor grill. Connor's family was gathered not far away, laughing around the fire pit with soft music playing from the Bluetooth speaker they brought every year. I was going to join them, but just as I approached, I heard Helene's voice during a phone call. She made no effort to keep private. "Ruby. She's sweet, but she's never really been part of this family. You know what I mean? There's just something off, you can tell just by looking." I froze behind a shaded cluster of shrubs, just empty in a way that scared me. It wasn't the first time I'd heard something like that. I went back to the room, opened my laptop, and sent a single email, just one line. "I agree to the terms. Proceed with final stage." 10 minutes later, Rachel replied, "I get it. I'll initiate the ownership transfer process first thing tomorrow. Congratulations." The deal was finalized in just 3 weeks, faster than expected because I had all the funds and legal documents ready. Birchlight Holdings, the company even Connor had never heard of, officially owned 70% of Ridgewood Estate. Everything was kept completely confidential. It didn't change. The logo didn't fire anyone, didn't make flashy upgrades to draw attention. I simply did what an actual owner should do: take care of the property. Every outdated HVAC system was replaced. We restructured employee benefits and increased wages for the front desk and housekeeping teams. I signed a contract with an environmental firm to restore the underground water system around the lake, something the previous owner had ignored for nearly a decade. The Hartwells couldn't help but notice the changes when they returned to Ridgewood this year. The check-in system now required ID and credit card verification, even for the so-called familiar names. No more booking rooms through a private call to the manager with the usual best lake view. Same as every year. Ask. As soon as she entered the lobby, Elaine scowled. "It's a brand new marble table." What became of the scent of lavender? I took a few steps back and grinned softly. A housekeeper used to get really bad allergies from the lavender, but they didn't care. I played the part of simple Ruby for the first 3 days of vacation. As they complained about the resort's lack of warmth, Connor's wife continued to sit at the table and listen. When asked to get extra dessert spoons for dinner, they still agreed. I had already made up my mind, so I didn't react. At the Friday night dinner, the new owner of Ridgewood would be announced. The whole Hartwell family and their close friends would be there at the welcome gala. Ethan, the new general manager, was given the exacting task of preparing the speech by me. A synopsis of the long-term goals focus on investing in people and ownership transition. Lastly, the name of the current owner is revealed. I wasn't planning on going out immediately. Before they saw my face, I wanted them to hear my name. I waited that evening on the balcony on the second floor, peering down through the wooden railing. Elaine was repeating phrases like, "Our family has been coming here for decades," while speaking with an old friend. "We really should have a private meeting with the new owner and give them some frank counsel." Calm and collected, Ethan entered the tiny stage. He lightly tapped his wine. The sound echoed through the glass and wood-paneled hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is our privilege to announce the new owner this year as part of Ridgewood Estate's management and development transition. The individual responsible for the resort's long-term sustainable vision strategy and improvements." He hesitated a moment. "Let's welcome Miss Ruby Marshall." When I put my hand on the railing and looked down, I could tell that the time had finally come because of the Hartwell family's shocked expressions. The room seemed to vanish when Ethan called my name. Silverware clattering onto plates caught my attention. Then, with wine spilling over the edge of her glass and soaking the snow-white tablecloth, Elaine leaped up her chair and scraped backward. "What?" Her voice was high and disbelieving as she exclaimed. Connor pivoted. Specifically, I glanced up to the second floor where I was standing composedly in a plain black dress. They would never call it elegant, I knew. His gaze expanded. His mouth fell open a little. He remained silent. I descended the stairs slowly. Everything was irrevocable. Every time my heels tapped the wooden steps, it sounded like a drumbeat. The room was still quiet when I got to the table. Even Connor's nephew, who was 10 years old, had ceased playing with his toy car beneath the table. I stopped next to Connor's chair and gave him a quick glance. "Are you Ridgewood's new owner?" His voice was hoarse with confusion as he asked. I took a while to respond. Rather, I faced the table where the whole Hartwell clan was still stunned and motionless. Elaine caught my attention as she fussed over her napkin as if it were the most important thing in the world. I tipped my head and said, "If you're not happy with the service lately, feel free to give your feedback directly," in a quiet but clear voice. "Going through the front desk is no longer necessary." Aunt Cassie let out a sharp exhale, and Haley, Connor's cousin, who used to make fun of my Oregon accent, was unable to speak. She parted her lips as if she had a question, but was at a loss for words. As I walked to the far end of the room where Ethan's microphone was still resting on the tiny live band stage, I met every stare, some stunned, some humiliated. I grabbed it. My hands remained steady. "Good night," I started smiling steadily. "I understand that some of you in the room may be feeling taken aback, and that's quite normal." There were a few uncomfortable giggles, but most people said nothing. I am in charge of Birchlight Holdings, which is now in charge of managing Ridgewood. My team and I have been quietly working to make this place better for the past year because we think a resort should be more than just beautiful. It should also be just compassionate and accountable. I stopped and turned to face the long table where the Hartwell family sat motionless, and I said, "Starting next season. Just like with other guests, all reservations will be made online. No more verbal exceptions or ambiguous privileges. Everyone is welcome, but they must be treated equally." Elaine started to reply, but I interrupted her with a composed expression. I called her mother for the first time in years without my voice shaking and said, "I know you used to think I wasn't good enough to belong to this family. However, I'm not here to request acceptance tonight. I'm here to remind everyone that even if they are underappreciated, they are still capable of holding the center of this room as its owner." I put down the microphone. The years I was dismissed, viewed as nothing more than a wife, were sealed when I turned and walked out, my heels hitting the floor like a stamp. The resort was enveloped in an eerie silence the following morning. There were no chuckles at the breakfast tables. There were awkward greeting side glances and an unusual silence that persisted among the Hartwells, no one taking pictures of cappuccinos for social media. I was not present at breakfast. Rather, Ethan and I went to check out a new renovation project at the resort's southern wing, which will soon be the first solar-powered wellness and eco-spa center in the area. The Hartwells used to play a major role as if they had founded the establishment themselves, and by the afternoon I was back for the cocktail party for returning guests, which is a Ridgewood tradition. However, the arrangement was different this time. They rearranged the ballroom. There was a small stage with an LED screen behind it, an open layout, warm lighting, and no tiered VIP tables or personalized nameplates reading the Hartwells, where I would be introducing the 3-year development plan for Ridgewood. A few patrons grinned and gave me a courteous nod as I entered. I noticed Lauren standing close to the bar holding her martini glass so firmly that her veins were visible. Haley hovered close by, feigning to speak to someone else, but her eyes never left me. Her neatly pinned voice was just loud enough for everyone to hear as I stood in front of the stage in a turquoise jumpsuit as the presentation started. I am aware that last night surprised, unnerved, and disappointed some of you. I get it. A few gentle chair movements. However, I'm not here to discuss the past tonight. I am here to share my vision for the future of Ridgewood. A full resort map with markers, more guest rooms, seasonal dining, and a community paddle sports center, all redesigned for sustainable and ecological use, were displayed on the screen behind me when I made a gesture. I mentioned that the Cecilia Foundation, a new initiative, is helping to fund some of these projects. For 18 years, my mother, Cecilia Marshall, was employed as a housekeeper in the state of Washington. She taught me to not wait for permission if you want respect. Create something they can't overlook. I looked around the room. Elaine's eyes remained fixed and her face tensed. This foundation will support scholarships and vocational training for women in the hospitality industry who are frequently disregarded for the silent work they perform on a daily basis. Additionally, Ridgewood will serve as the pilot site. There were a few dispersed claps. There was a slight hiss coming from Haley's direction. Lauren got up suddenly and left, as though protest had the power to alter reality, heels clacking forcefully against the wood floor. "At last," I said, turning to the final slide. "All long-term leases for guest houses, lodges, and cabins that were previously offered under family discounts will be examined and reissued under regular terms beginning the following quarter." A diagram of the cabins currently occupied at ridiculously low rates was displayed on the screen, Everyone knew which cabin belonged to whom, even though I didn't label names. At a table by the windows, Connor took a seat. He slouched his shoulders a little, they clasped hands, nothing to say. He realized that I no longer required permission, so there was no defense. Finally, I said, I hope everyone understands. Although there are no longer any shortcuts, Ridgewood is still accessible to everyone. No special access, no backdoors. Lauren Subject sent me an email 3 days after the cocktail party. Hello. Can we speak in private, friend? I believe there has been some miscommunication. I sincerely thank you for your contributions to Ridgewood. Could we get together to talk about the cabin? Many thanks. Instead, I opted for silence. I sent it along with a note to the legal department of Birch Light Holdings. All internal billing records, original lease agreements, and Cabin 3 booking history from 2019 to the present. Lauren was unaware that the new system I put in place had reported her cabin for unapproved rentals during all of the busiest times of the previous 3 years, totaling over $41,000, all of which had been deposited into an account in her husband's name. It didn't ask for the money back because the freelance accountant had no record of filing taxes. The dialogue wasn't forced. I merely forwarded the documents to the state tax office together with a letter from our business, attesting that we never gave the go-ahead for the unlawful operations. Lauren was called in for an unexpected financial audit 2 weeks later. I got one message from her. This is what you actually did to me. I didn't respond to her message. Mr. Will Hartwell Connor's uncle was no different. The lease for cabin number 6, which he referred to as his traditional family retreat, had actually ended last year. He extended informal agreements outside the system by using his connections with the former manager. When I learned, I kept quiet. When he called to ask why there were so many new hires this year, I didn't ask him any questions. I merely gave our legal department instructions to give a 30-day notice to leave the property. No negotiations, no extensions. Now that cabin is owned by a nonprofit that helps underprivileged military veteran families by giving them free vacations. On Independence Day, they took up residence. The welcome letter was written by me. Lane, on the other hand, arrived one Thursday afternoon. No notice, no appointment. She looked as though she was going to a sponsor meeting because she was wearing a pearl necklace, white heels, and a dark tweed dress. She said, "We need to talk," as she entered my office. She spoke in a calm but obviously tense tone. I asked her to take a seat. "Ruby, this has gotten out of hand." Her fake smile barely held as she started. "We are related. Between us, we can manage this. Surely there's no need to make a big deal out of it, I'm aware." She continued, "You've put in a lot of effort. You did a good job. However, if this is made public, the public will not comprehend. People are going to think, I believe we should end here." Calm but firm, I cut my voice short. Her name was prominently displayed on the label of a folder that I removed from a drawer. I set it down before her on the table. After giving it a long look, Elaine picked it up. Her hands trembled a little. "Included are recordings of internal conversations in which you insulted, threatened, or coerced 3 front desk staff members into quitting because they didn't live up to family standards. You called a housekeeper disrespectful and ungrateful in an email. Additionally, there is a handwritten letter from an intern who was told not to get in touch with you because of the disturbance. I handled these situations in a low-key manner. It has all been notarized. And I look her in the eyes if she thinks I'm being dramatic. After that, I'm ready to make everything public." With her lips pressed firmly, Elaine sat motionless. Now, as though to brace herself against the anger simmering beneath her designer coat, her hand tightened around the folder. She wasn't in danger from me. I was obviously establishing limits. She once pushed her chair back, straightened her dress, and used the tissue to wipe her hands as if they were filthy. Before leaving, she said icily, "You'll regret defying me." My only response was silence. I didn't try to get her to leave. Someone who never once showed me respect was not someone I owed civility to. On a Sunday afternoon, Connor stopped by to see me. His mother left Ridgewood 2 weeks later. Without sending me a text, he simply knocked on the office door while carrying a cup of unsweetened coffee, just like he used to make for me every morning for the first 9 years of our marriage. "Is now a bad moment?" His voice was lower than usual as he asked. I motioned for him to enter. We were seated opposite one another. No pretense, no papers, no screens. Just 2 individuals who made the decision to start a life together. I'm trying to unravel it quietly now. I'm not sure where to begin. With fatigued eyes, Connor spoke. "I believed I understood you, but now I see that perhaps I was only aware of the version of you that I preferred." I remained silent. Sometimes the only thing you need to see your strength and resolve is acknowledgement. "But I see loneliness too," he added. Furthermore, I'm not sure if you still have room for me in your life. When I worked through the night, he brought hot soup to my office and once said, "As long as you're with me, my family will come around." I looked at him, the man who had once driven me across the small towns of Oregon in an old Subaru. However, they never did. He also never forced them to try. I said softly, "Connor, you're not a bad man. You simply always took the easy route." Ultimately, I had to decide on the path where I could speak. We did not quarrel. The door did not slam. After remaining for a few more minutes, he put the coffee cup down on the table and walked away. Although we didn't say goodbye, we were both aware that the chapter was over. I relocated the Ridgewood main office to a tiny cabin on the lake's west shore a month later. Due to its poor view, the unit was once the least popular. With a new team, a clear mission, and a sense of freedom I had never experienced before, I started everything over there. I no longer look at Elaine's messages. Lauren's flowery email responses are not read by me. Now they are aware of who I am. More significantly, though, I no longer require them. I like to enjoy a cup of mint tea on the porch in the early mornings while listening to the sound of oars gliding across the water and the wind blowing through the pines. Some days, visitors stop by the small office to inquire about rates, assuming I'm the receptionist. Never feeling inferior, I continue to give them a brochure and smile bajam. Recognition is not the source of power. It results from not waiting for approval from others to be who you are. And I didn't realize that for 10 years. I took a stroll along the lakeshore that night. Only my own footsteps, no lights, softly crunching on parched grass. My mother came to mind. Her night shifts, her rough hands. Even in the housekeeper's uniform, she always held her head high when speaking. She didn't ask for praise. I learned to stand tall from her. For myself, not for anybody else. I came to a halt at the small wooden pier that overlooked the lake. It was once the Harwells' preferred location for sunsets. It is quiet and motionless now. Have you ever been undervalued? Have you ever felt left out? Have you ever felt smaller in places that ought to have been familiar? Help. You are aware. To be whole, you don't need anyone's approval. And I hope you will share your story if mine resonated with you. Someone may need to recognize themselves in the journey you've already made it through. I'm still here for my part. In the area I took back. To live fully as myself, not to win. Ruby's own in-laws ignored and marginalized her for years. But rather than striking out, she used skill and perseverance to subtly increase her strength. When she had authority, she reacted with dignity and boundaries rather than rage. The Ruby story serves as a reminder that sometimes we need our own validation. It starts when we decide to silently but unobtrusively stand up for ourselves. How do you feel about Ruby's journey? Has your own family ever made you feel inferior? Leave a comment below with your story. For more inspiring tales about life and family, remember to subscribe to the channel. Story 3. Brandon is my name. My age is and I've been the one behind the curtain for as long as I can remember. While my family grinned for the pictures, I was discreetly pulling the threads, arranging paying, repairing, and smoothing things out. That's not what I say to sound honorable, it's simply the way it has always been. I was the planner, the trustworthy one, and the responsible one. I was already assisting my younger siblings with their homework and making appointments for my mom's doctor's visits when I was 12. Dad used to call me the glue and give me a pat on the back, but glue never gets a thank you. Until it cracks, it merely keeps everything together. This year was Dad's 65th birthday, a significant amount. Retirement, Medicare, everything. I assumed that I would go all out. Every time he expressed his desire to travel to the Caribbean, a bright sunny place with unending buffets and crystal clear water. 6 months before the trip, I began organizing it. I looked into shore excursions, rooms, and cruise lines. In order to get a personalized cake with the words "Happy 65th Captain Kin" inscribed in gold icing, I even worked with the ship's events manager. I spent a total of $200 on the vacation. I remained still. I did this for my father. Not only for him either. It was for everyone in the family. For my parents, I reserved cottages. Kevin, my younger brother, and his spouse. Myself, my sister Gina, and Lisa, her girlfriend. There are 7 of us. I ensured that everyone had a paid itinerary and a private balcony. Scuba diving in St. Thomas. San Juan zipline. In Barbados sampling rum. Everything. I even created custom baggage tags. I was reviewing my packing list at my work 3 days prior to the vacation. It was a group text from Gina when my phone died. "Just so you know, Brandon, we gave Lisa your cottage instead. According to Dad, she makes him laugh more and he wants to spend the trip with her." I hope that's cool. I read it again after blinking at the screen. To be sure I hadn't missed a joke, I scrolled higher. Perhaps they were planning a surprise and this was part of it. Not at all. Kevin's response was, LOL, classic dad. Lisa used a heart emoji in response. Nobody spoke to me. Nobody inquired about my feelings about relinquishing the place I had paid for. Nobody even bothered to express gratitude. They treated me like a stray extra who had gone off to their holiday, bumping my hotel, my trip, and my card. For a while, I just sat there, not upset, not quite yet, mostly in a state of shock. You are familiar with the constricted sensation behind your eyelids, similar to the buildup to a storm. That was how it felt. The realization that this was nothing new came slowly and bitterly. It was only the priciest iteration of an ancient design. They constantly took, and I always gave. Lisa had more humor. Lisa was more entertaining. Lisa was nearer to me and the family. The organizer was me, the backup plan, the wallet. I took a good look at the message before responding. Make a copy of that. I only stated that. Not cool, not okay. 2 terms with a wide range of meanings. They didn't inquire further. I poured myself some whiskey that evening. I turned on my laptop and signed into all of the reservation portals that were available to me. The group airport transfer, the cake seller, the cruise line, and even the private island tour. I canceled all of them and made arrangements to send everyone to the port. The problem with being the planner, the fixer, and the glue is this. Everything was in my name, including the booking confirmation and the password. 3:24 a.m. Gina sent me an SMS. Hello, just making sure. Has the snorkeling trip been canceled? The app does not display it. I didn't respond. Kevin added, Bro, why does the cruise booking say no active reservation at 4:11 a.m.? What's happening? Didn't respond yet. 6 a.m. My mother called. I let it to ring. After that, I switched off my phone and took a stroll. While some repercussions was to be expected, what transpired next was a cascade. It seems that my parents had previously discussed the cruise with all of their acquaintances. Both Gina and Kevin had taken time off from their jobs. They had set up automated light timers, dog sitters, and daycare. For the trip, Lisa reportedly purchased a whole new beach attire, tagging it on Instagram with the hashtag #CruiseQueen. And now nothing. Don't travel, not a cake, no beach. Even their enhanced drink packages were canceled by me. However, it wasn't the end. The satisfying part wasn't even that. Because I was organizing my own sea for the last few years while they were rushing, contacting support, ranting with customer service representatives, and trying to rebook at the last minute only to discover that everything was either sold out or quadruple the price. In a house I owned, my parents had been living for free. I inherited the house from my grandpa, so technically it was still in my name. It made sense, so I'd let them remain there. They were mortgage-free. I didn't require the location. And I felt like a good son because of it. Though once I saw that sentence, everything changed. I thus got in touch with a property management business, scheduled a thorough inspection, and delivered a formal notice of tenancy termination. 3 days later, the locks were replaced. The utility accounts no longer included their name. They were utilizing a shared Verizon family plan that I terminated under my name. Their storage unit, of course, paid until the end of the month before being scheduled for removal. I didn't yell, it wasn't a dramatic email that I wrote. I just relocated each component individually. The worst part is that they didn't even know the trip was canceled until the day before their scheduled departure. They arrived at the harbor wearing similar t-shirts that read, Dad's 65th ship happens, smiling and carrying luggage. However, no check-in was made. No reservations, no cabin, not a cake, no Brandon. That only served as the warm-up. It was already too late when they recognized what had transpired. Since I started receiving calls once more, I am aware of this. Not messages. Voicemails and calls from confused and desperate people. Some are enraged while some are only begging. It appears that there has been some sort of error, Brandon honey. The first message came through with Mom's voice crackling. We're not on the list the cruise line claims. Would you please give them a call? You made all the reservations correct, Kevin again. All okay, man. Not amusing. As if we understand. You're angry. Lisa's statements were meaningless. Give me a call. Let's make this right. There was no voicemail from Gina. She just made 7 consecutive calls. Lisa. For the first time in weeks, she sent me a message. Actually, Brandon, I know we started off badly, but this is a huge event for your dad. Don't spoil his special day over a misunderstanding, Before I clicked, I watched her message go unread for an hour, observed. Since it wasn't about the trip at that point, rather it was about every family portrait I took for them, and being instructed to stand behind the camera, I didn't respond. All of them. I appreciate your planning. Every Christmas I spent cleaning dishes I never received. Every Brandon will take care of things, treating me like a live assistant while the joy was watching football. Rather than their son, their sibling. I had given them the benefit of the doubt for years, telling myself that they loved me, that they were only in the moment, and that they didn't mean it. Simply didn't convey it in the same manner. However, I paid for and handed it to Lisa with a nonchalant, "She makes Dad laugh more," after they stole my room, which was my actual wager on the trip. I realized then that they still remembered me. They simply didn't believe that I was important. Then they were outdoors now, literally, because they returned to the house I used to let them reside in 3 days after the disastrous cruise and were unable to enter. With my car parked across the street, my windows tinted, and my sunglasses on, I watched. I wanted to see it because I needed it to feel real, not because I was cruel. For once, I wanted them to experience the same sense of exclusion I did, not welcome. The handle was first tried by a small mother, then the subsequent doorbell, fumbling with his keys. The previous evening, I had had my locks changed. Once more they rang. I was knocked. I saw the bewilderment turn to annoyance, then to fear. Kevin took his phone out. I could infer what he observed. Due to non-payment and unauthorized subletting, they were given 30 days to leave the property by a forwarded legal notice that I had printed and emailed. Technically true thanks to Lisa crashing there without notice a few weeks prior. Gina stormed to the side of the house and tried the back door. I'd had that reinforced too. Eventually they noticed the neighbor watching the same neighborhood once asked me why I never came to the barbecues, then laughed when I said I wasn't invited. She gave me a nod as I drove off that afternoon. The texts turned angrier after that. "You had to know, right? Where are we supposed to go, Branda? This is insane. You're acting like a stranger." Lisa's post about the cruise quietly disappeared from her feed. Then the real unraveling began. Dad's old business partner texted me to ask why the emergency fund wasn't responding to payment requests. Turns out my name was still attached as co-signer. Another thing I'd been too helpful to change, so I did. I moved the money to a trust under my name. Legal. Clean. I even called to confirm there was no breach of contract. There wasn't. Next came the streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Spotify. Family plan, all canceled. Passwords changed. Email logins locked. A week later, I got a call from Mom. I stared at it, didn't answer. Then another voicemail. She sounded tired, smaller. "Brandon, we don't know what to do. Your dad's sleeping on Kevin's couch and Jenny's staying with friends. I know you're angry, but this is your family. We're not perfect, but we love you. Can we please just talk?" I sat on my couch surrounded by silence. No laughter, no noise, no obligation, just tranquility. And then I got another message from Jenna this time. No greeting, no apology. Just, "Are you seriously going to throw away your entire family over a joke?" That's when something shifted in me. Because it wasn't just a joke, it was a summary. A distillation of every moment I'd been told I was less than every time they pushed me aside. I then acted shocked when I didn't stick around to pick up the pieces. I thought about replying. Instead, I started writing something else. Not to them, to the lawyer, because this wasn't just a vacation anymore. This was a full reset, and they hadn't even seen the worst part yet. I didn't reply to Jenny's message. I didn't need to. I was already several steps ahead drafting documents with my attorney to formalize what had already begun. A clean separation. Emotionally, financially, legally. There was no major encounter, no shouting match. I didn't hurl dishes or yell that I was done since I had been done softly, gently in the manner. You stop watering a plant not out of malice, but because you understand it was never yours to take care of in the first place. The lawyer's office was a tiny spot situated between a bakery and a tailor shop downtown. Nothing spectacular, but it felt decisive. We met in person. I brought a list carefully written, cross-referenced. My name was still on, more than I realized. My parents' health insurance copay account, a line of credit they'd been utilizing for years in case of crises. The registration on the family automobile remained in my name from when I helped refinance it 5 years ago. I ordered the lawyer to transfer, revoke, dissolve, or close everything, whichever would remove the relationships fastest. And that storage unit, I had it open. I didn't discard anything. I'm not that individual. However, because Dad was staying at Kevin's, I paid movers to have everything packed up and sent there. On top of the boxes, the invoice was taped. At this point, the message's tone changed once again. They had lost their anger. They didn't understand. I was hurt. It's almost theatrical. This isn't you, Brandon. Could we just take a seat like grown-ups? You're taking revenge. Hateful that one stayed with me. I nearly burst out laughing at the irony. Because I had always been understanding, forgiving, and accommodating for these 4 years. Kevin destroyed his car and required a trip from the police station by himself, so I missed my college graduation. Jen, rent money twice without ever requesting reimbursement. In an attempt to cheer them up following Dad's operation last fall, I sent Mom and Dad to Vermont. I did it for no recognition. I think that's what family was meant to be, therefore I did it. However, they didn't. Not at all. My generosity wasn't love to them, it was inventory. A resource is anything that can be distributed, utilized, assumed. The day I discovered the voicemail made that very obvious. I hadn't spoken to that person in years. Uncle Denny, the younger brother of my dad, he got into a fight with his father about a little matter. Dennis never paid back the money he borrowed, according to Dad. Dad lied about a loan, Dennis said. That never took place. Who can tell the truth, but I nearly didn't respond when Dennis called me out of the blue. He sounded lower than I had recalled. Slower, as if each syllable had to be drawn from the depths. I don't want to interfere, but I believe you ought to be aware, Brandon. The other day, your mom left a message on your aunt's phone. I was unaware that it was still recording. She was ranting about you, saying that this whole situation is simply another instance of your constant pretense of superiority. Said that you're punishing them because you can't bear to see other people happy and that you've never understood what it takes to make sacrifices. He hesitated. I wanted to share it with you. I said very little. I just thanked him. I hung up and sat in quiet, although I told him I appreciated the call. Not even the words were painful. It was the affirmation. The knowledge that after everything they were still blind to their mistakes. They continued to portray themselves as the victims in a narrative that I had no desire to create. The next day, I revised my will, took all of my family members off of the beneficiaries list, and established a new trust that would fund first-generation college student scholarships. Silently, there are no structures or plaques bearing my name. Just something practical, something tangible. I changed my phone number the same week. New carrier, new account, new phone. Only my best buddy Sam, my lawyer, and my assistant were given the number. It was Sam who brought 2 six-packs and a bag of tacos over that evening. He remained silent, asked if I wanted to watch something that wasn't about family, and then offered me a drink. We watched an outdated action film with predictable explosions and awful dialogue. It was flawless. The knock on my door came at that moment. I had no expectations, no deliveries, no appointments. I went to check on the people while you did the TV, Sam. Jenna was the one. Hair secured. She has dark circles beneath her eyes. She held her phone tightly in one hand. In the other was what appeared to be a folder. She didn't appear upset. She appeared exhausted. The door was not opened by me. Softer this time, she knocked. I just want to talk, Brandon. I stood behind the door and watched her. Not talking, not moving. Then she said it. It has to do with Dad. Something took place. A gentle knock again, then a softer one. In Kevin's backyard, he fell off a ladder. He's okay. Bruised ribs and a sprained wrist. He's afraid, though. He's requesting you. I remained silent, not by way of the door, not in my mind. I wasn't cold in my silence. Clarity was the key. I was no longer the anxious, eager-to-please son. I didn't feel guilt surging up or some compulsion to rush to his side and fix everything. I just felt curious. I was wondering what angle this was. Curious if they still thought this was a game of leverage. I know we messed up, Jenna said after a long pause. I know you don't trust us. Maybe you never should have, but he's asking for you, Brandon. Not Kevin, not even Lisa. You. I finally opened the door, not because she said the right thing, but because I was ready to look her in the eye. And when I did, I saw it. Not manipulation, not a properly rehearsed script, just fatigue. And maybe a shard of comprehension. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her voice when she spoke again was rough. He stated he wanted to apologize. I gave a nod. So let him. She seemed bewildered. To you, Brandon? Not in a group SMS. Not through me, to you. I went outside and slammed the light door behind me. Didn't ask her inside. She gave me the folder after we stood on the porch for a minute. I opened it. A note in Dad's blocky, uneven handwriting was inside. It was brief. I'm not very good at saying the correct words, Brandon. Not at all. I am aware that I have relied too much on you. Too much was expected. I also realize that I never truly gave you the gratitude I deserved. The slack was always taken by you. And by pretending it didn't matter, I made it worse. I allowed others to belittle you. I occasionally joined in. I'm responsible for it. I apologize. None of it was fair to you. I hope you're content right now. Dad, you deserve to be. I waited to feel anything as I stood there, reading it again. anger, verification, sadness. But I just sensed the reality of it. Although it wasn't flawless, the apology was sincere. Jenna gave me a glance. Did you decide not to call? Claimed that he assumed you would hang up if he phoned. Block him if he texted you. She was not mistaken. She went on, I'm not here to guilt you. I wanted to let you know that he's making an effort. I gave a nod. Gave the folder back, closing it. Inform him I received the letter. Would you like to know? Slowly, she nodded once more. Also for the first time in a long time. She didn't dispute. Okay, she responded simply, and made her way back to her vehicle. The following day, I saw her drive away. I mailed Kevin a little package. There was a post-it note and a laminated copy of the letter. I appreciate the letter. We're through, but I accept your apologies. Be careful. I didn't require anything more. I would not return. I didn't require any staged forgiveness. Arc a tearful reunion or a dramatic confrontation. I had no desire to gradually reintegrate them into my life, one text at a time. The chapter was closed. I choose to spend the ensuing months creating something greater instead. I formally opened the scholarship fund I had established and named it after my grandpa, who bequeathed me the dramatizing mansion. I paid for the first 3 students' debt-free community college educations. We met and spoke with them, provided them with the type of assistance I wish I had received when I was their age. I had always wanted to visit Portugal, but I kept putting it off till later, so Sam and I did just that. For the first time in decades, I felt as I stood on the cliffs overlooking the ocean, as if I were no longer holding my breath. I sold the family home at a respectable profit and used the proceeds to invest in a small nonprofit incubator for first-generation business owners. I also purchased a tiny condo in the city. None of it was aired by me. Didn't publish anything online. I kept my family in the dark. After the voyage, I only lived for a year or so. That never took place. A letter arrived in the mail, no address for return. There was a picture of a photo dad with a cast on his chair arm, grinning clumsily at the rear camera. We still speak about you, it stated. Lisa finally learned how to make the stew you enjoyed. She always burns it. I figured you'd like that. All right, I grinned but didn't answer. There was no closure. Those words must also be definitive. Freedom was what I received. Freedom from constantly being the fixer and the helper. The emotional trash can. Freedom to decide who may and cannot access me. I never lost interest in them. I just stopped allowing them to treat me like a disposable object. They can accept the repercussions, and at last I began life according to my own terms.